Your story isn't over. Look at me. Carter Wynn's voice came out hoarse, choked, pushing through the screech of twisting metal and the acrid stench of burning rubber. His hand gripped the woman's shoulder inside the mangled car, his knuckles bleeding from scraping against shattered glass. Her cold blue eyes widened, dazed, as if staring through him into some void beyond the wreckage. Her Tesla Model S had spun across 3 lanes of Interstate 45 before slamming into the concrete divider, the front end crumpled like wrinkled paper. Flames began licking around the warped hood. You have to fight for whatever's ahead. Fight from the roadside. A child's voice rang out, thin and clear. Dad, you're my hero. Carter froze for an instant. Layla, his 8-year-old daughter, stood by their beat-up Honda Civic, her hands clutching the straps of a unicorn backpack, her face caught between fear and absolute trust. The morning was supposed to be simple. Drop her off at school early, glance over a few notes, then head to the interview at Sterling Logistics. A chance to change everything. But all of it had turned to ash in the heat roaring from the burning car. The woman in the driver's seat blinked, a thin line of blood tracing down her temple. The tailored suit she wore probably cost more than his monthly household expenses combined. Go, she whispered, nearly drowned by the crackling flames. It's about to— I'm not leaving you! Carter roared, yanking at the jammed door. Metal shrieked, unmoving. Black smoke billowed into his face. Other drivers stood back, phones raised high, recording the disaster like spectators at a show. He abandoned the door, shoved his body through the window. Undo your seatbelt! She stayed still. Carter's fingers found the latch, pressed. The belt snapped free. Now listen. I pull. You push with your legs. Got it? At last her eyes focused. A faint nod. Count to 3. 1, 2, 3. He wrapped his arms tight around her body, heaved with all his strength. Glass tore at his skin, searing pain, but he didn't stop. She pushed with trembling legs, summoning the last of her strength. For a moment, time froze. Then metal screamed and gave way. She burst free of the seat. Carter staggered back, dragging her, both of them collapsing onto the pavement just as flames surged into the cabin, engulfing the car in a violent explosion. He pulled her farther away, propping her against the curb. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. His breath came ragged. Are you hurt anywhere else? She stared at the inferno, her hand drifting to the gash at her temple, whispering, You saved me. Anyone would, he said, though both of them knew no one else had stepped forward. Paramedics rushed in, wrapping her in a silver blanket, voices calm and professional. Carter rose, brushing off ash and grime from his interview shirt, now torn and scorched. Blood seeped through the fabric of his left arm. He glanced at his watch. 8:47. The interview was at 9. That chance had gone up in smoke. As she was helped into the ambulance, she looked back, her voice raspy. Who are you? A firefighter? Carter looked down at his charred clothes. No, just someone passing by. The doors slammed shut, sirens wailed, and the ambulance sped off, leaving him on the gridlocked highway. He turned to Layla. She ran into his arms, hugging him tightly. Dad, you were so brave. He held her, burying his face in her hair. Are you okay? I was so scared, but I knew you'd save her. Carter looked at the blood spreading on his sleeve, his mind tallying costs, stitches, antiseptic, more than he had planned. The interview was gone. That life-changing chance, now like a severed limb. Come on, he forced a smile. You'll be late for school. What about your interview? Layla's eyes lifted, worried. He squeezed her shoulder, choking back the lie. I'll reschedule." But he knew jobs like that never came twice. They drove away, leaving the scene behind. Carter had no idea that dozens of videos were already flooding the internet from every angle, tagged #TexasHero, #BurningCarRescue. He didn't know that in a hospital a few miles away, the blue-eyed woman was asking desperately about the stranger who had pulled her from the fire. And he certainly didn't know her name was Aurora Sterling, and the job interview he had just missed was at her company. All Carter knew was the familiar weight of disappointment, and the small, warm hand of his daughter gripping his as if he were the strongest man in the world. The small Montrose apartment was silent, except for the low hum of the old refrigerator and the scratch of colored pencils on the kitchen table. Under the bare ceiling light, Carter sat focused, stitching the gash on his forearm with a cheap kit he had bought from a dollar store. A doctor's visit would cost $120. He didn't have it. One bottle of antiseptic and a sewing kit, $6. A simple calculation. A brutal one. "Does it hurt, Dad?" Layla asked without looking up from her page. "Only when I think about it," Carter muttered, tightening the last knot, a soft groan escaping his lips. Layla pushed the paper toward him. A drawing with bold, colorful strokes. Him in a cape, flying through the sky, pulling a woman out of a blazing car. "I drew it for your new office," her little voice declared firmly. Carter's chest tightened. "What office, sweetheart?" "The one you'll have after you reschedule your interview." Her eyes shone, filled with trust, like the tiny yellow sun she had drawn in the corner of the page. He couldn't tell her the truth. When he called to explain, HR had cut him off with a flat answer. The position was already filled. He was now an unreliable candidate. Heroism didn't go on resumes. Carter taped the drawing to the refrigerator door, right next to the electricity shutoff notice. "This is the best one yet," he whispered, his voice breaking. Across the city, Aurora Sterling lay in a VIP hospital room. Her head was wrapped in white bandages, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat pulsing on the monitor. The crash had left a few small wounds and a mild concussion, but the doctors said she was lucky to be alive. On the iPad beside her bed, she replayed the same clip over and over. The shaky, grainy footage, but the voice rang clear. "Your story isn't over." Look at me distorted through a phone speaker. It still pierced the icy armor she had worn for years. It was the only thing that pulled her out of the haze after the accident. All her life, Aurora had believed, emotions were weakness. No feeling, only calculation. No hope, only execution. But the stranger with the soot-streaked face and fierce eyes had forced her to fight. The door opened. Benji Klein, her perpetually fidgety young assistant, entered with a stack of papers in hand. "Any news?" Aurora asked, eyes fixed on the screen. Benji shook his head. "We ran facial recognition across every database. Nothing. Police came up empty too. It's like he's a ghost. A ghost who saved me, Benji." Her voice was faint, but sharp as a blade. "Find him." The phone buzzed. A conference call. Aurora accepted, her face instantly hardening into a steel mask. "Parrish, report." Damon Parrish's smooth, familiar voice replied. "Good morning, Aurora. Diagnostics are in. The Titan arm only had a minor software glitch. Engineering is patching it. Next week's demo will be fine." Aurora frowned, the wound at her temple throbbing. "A minor glitch that dropped a 200-pound container, Damon? That's not a glitch. That's a lawsuit waiting to explode. Just an anomaly. The system is running at 99% efficiency. We should focus on the 99." Aurora's voice dropped, cold as ice. "That last 1% is enough to bankrupt the company. Fix it. really fix it, not patch it, and pray. She ended the call and turned her chair toward the window. Houston gleamed under the sun, the glass and steel kingdom she had built with her own hands, and yet she felt exactly like the woman trapped in the burning car, stuck, waiting for a way out. Carter's words echoed again. Fight for whatever lies ahead. She was fighting. But for the first time, Aurora wasn't sure she was winning. 3 years earlier. In the lab, Elliot Sterling bent over the ether drive engine, his eyes alight like a child touching a miracle for the first time. Aurora stood beside him, smiling at her husband. See this? Just adjust the vibration frequency here, and efficiency goes up 40%. Aurora laughed, resting a hand on his shoulder. You always throw out the craziest numbers. Crazy? Elliot looked up, feigning hurt. This will be the machine that changes the world, Aurora. No pollution. Absolute efficiency. We'll rewrite the future. It was the last time she ever saw him alive. 2 weeks later, the test flight carrying the ether drive crashed catastrophically. The report called it mechanical failure. But Aurora knew the truth. Victor Ashford, Elliot's business partner, had sabotaged it to steal the design. He succeeded. Ashford Dynamics built an empire on her husband's grave. Aurora returned to the present, eyes sweeping the city below. For 3 years, she had built Sterling Logistics from ashes, wrapping herself in the persona of the Ice Queen of tech. Untouchable, unbreakable, until a nameless man dragged her out of the flames and forced her to face life head-on. For the first time in 3 years, Aurora Sterling felt truly alive. 2 days after the accident. Aurora Sterling lay in her luxurious hospital suite, the stitches on her temple beginning to heal, but her icy blue eyes still carried a shadow of haunting. On the iPad by her bed, she had replayed the rescue video dozens of times. Your story isn't over. The words echoed in her head like a mantra. For 3 years since Elliot's death, Aurora had lived like a machine, calculating, cold, never allowing herself to feel. But in that moment at death's door, a stranger had made her feel alive. And she knew one thing for certain. She had to find him. The door swung open. Benji Klein entered, clutching a tablet, his face alight with excitement. Miss Sterling! We found him. Aurora sat upright. Tell me. Benji cast the image onto the large screen. The shirt he wore had a faint embroidered logo. We magnified the clearest frame. It belongs to a temporary labor company. Janitorial, maintenance, security. On the screen appeared a familiar face, gentle eyes, a faint smile. Facial match, 98%. His name is Carter Wynn, a current shot through Aurora's spine. Where is he now? Benji swallowed, his voice faltering. The issue is, for the past 6 months, Carter Wynn has been contracted to our own company, Sterling Logistics and Robotics. Aurora froze. The man from the fire, the hero in the video, the night shift janitor mopping the halls of her headquarters. A cruel twist of the universe's irony. She drew in a long breath, her eyes sharpening once more. Prepare the helicopter. But the doctors... Aurora cut him off, her voice cold steel. Benji, did I stutter? Benji stiffened. No, ma'am. Right away. That night, Warehouse 3 reverberated with a solitary clamor. The prototype Titan arm undergoing testing. Beneath the harsh industrial lights, the $15 million machine operated with imposing presence. Carter Wynn, pushing his rattling cart, quietly swept the floor. He paused, watching 2 engineers hunched over a laptop, typing furiously as though every answer lived in lines of code. But Carter saw something else. He noticed immediately. The main joint of the sorting arm vibrated faintly, shifting off by mere fractions of a millimeter. Today, it had dropped a container. Tomorrow, it could snap, turning into flying steel. The engineers didn't see it. They hunted for errors in the software. No one thought to simply look at the machine. Carter almost pushed on with his broom. He wasn't an engineer. His job was to mop up spilled coffee. But then the rhythmic clunk, clunk of the loose wheel on his cart matched the abnormal tremor of the arm, and he thought of Layla, and the drawing taped to their fridge. Dad as a hero. He stopped, glanced around. No one noticed. From his cart, he pulled a discarded metal strip and a roll of thin wire. In minutes, Carter had fashioned a makeshift but solid fix. The Titan arm stood steady, the vibration gone. He went back to work, as if he had never paused. Carter had no idea that every move had just been captured on the security cameras, and by the next morning, that very footage would save a CEO's career and bury the reputation of a deceitful chief engineer. Nor did he know that Aurora Sterling, the woman he had pulled from the flames, was aboard a helicopter flying straight toward his life. Weekend sunlight spilled across the small yard. The air carried a mix of fresh-cut grass and car exhaust, the familiar scent of Montrose. Carter sat on the concrete steps, patiently guiding Layla as she threaded the chain back onto her bike's gear. See? You just need to line up the teeth. Don't force it. It's greasy. Layla wrinkled her nose, wiping her hands on her jeans. Everything worth fixing is a little dirty, Carter said, giving the pedal one last turn. The chain caught, spinning smoothly. There, good as new. Layla's bright grin was enough to make the broken world around Carter feel whole again. It was a rare, peaceful morning. No extra shifts, no leaking faucets. Just him and his daughter. Then the sound came. A deep thump-thump, faint at first, then closer. Carter thought it was a news helicopter, but the rotor beats grew heavier, pressing into his chest. Children stopped playing. Adults stepped out onto porches, looking skyward. The blades drowned out every other sound. Out of the blue sky, a black shape descended like a hunting bird. The helicopter bore the sharp-edged logo of Sterling Logistics, and it wasn't heading toward downtown, but directly toward them. "Dad," Layla whispered, her voice a mix of fear and awe. Carter pulled her close, shielding her instinctively as the chopper landed on the small patch of grass at the end of the block. Rotor wash tore through the street, scattering dust and leaves, whipping his hair against his face. His heartbeat matched the pounding blades. This scene didn't belong to his neighborhood. It belonged to the other side of the freeway, the world of glass towers and penthouses. The helicopter touched down with clinical precision. The roar softened to a rumble. The door slid open. Aurora Sterling stepped out. No more blood-stained suit. She wore dark tailored trousers, a silk blouse, her hair tied neatly back. A small bandage covered the wound at her temple. She appeared strong, untouchable, as though sculpted from a material different from everyone else on this street. Her cold blue eyes swept the crowd before locking on Carter. She strode forward, heels sinking lightly into the grass. The crowd parted instinctively. Aurora stopped at the steps. "Carter win?" Her voice was just as he remembered. Sharp, commanding. Carter nodded, his throat dry. Layla peeked from behind his leg. "That's the lady from the burning car," she whispered loudly enough for all to hear. Aurora's gaze softened for a fleeting second at Layla, then returned to Carter. "I'm Aurora Sterling." "You saved me." She extended her hand, holding a thick cream-colored envelope. "I believe this belongs to you. A token of my gratitude, enough to ensure you and your daughter never have to worry again." The whole block fell silent. Carter looked at the envelope, then at her. In her eyes was the absolute certainty of someone who believed every problem could be solved with money. He thought of the missed interview, the stack of bills, the drawing on the fridge, and his daughter's proud eyes. He shook his head, slight but unmistakable. "I can't accept it. I didn't do it for money. I did it because it was right. Your safety, that's reward enough." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Aurora stood frozen, for the first time in her adult life, stunned into silence. No one turned down money like that. No one. Her phone buzzed urgently, insistent. She ignored it. "Mr. Wynne," she began, trying to reclaim her composure. "I don't think you understand." The phone vibrated harder. Aurora pulled it out. On the screen, Damon Parrish's name, with a text in all caps. "Clients are here." Demo moved up. "Happening now." Her expression shifted instantly. The grateful, shaken woman vanished, replaced by the razor-sharp CEO. The crisis she had tried to push aside crashed back into her reality. "I have to go," she said quickly, her voice clipped. "All business." Aurora paused, looking at Carter. For a brief instant, something close to desperation flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Wynne, I'll be back. We're not finished." She turned, walking toward the helicopter. The door slid shut. The rotors roared again, lifting the sleek black machine into the air, banking toward downtown, leaving Carter, Layla, and the entire street in dust and heavy silence. The thick envelope still lay in Aurora Sterling's hand. Mrs. Rodriguez gasped. "Who on earth was that?" "Sterling Logistics CEO," Mr. Thompson replied, astonished. "I've seen her on the news." "How much money was she about to give Carter?" someone asked. Layla tugged at her father's sleeve. "Why didn't we take it?" "I could have gotten a new bike." Carter knelt to meet her eyes. "Remember what I told you? Do the right thing. Because it's right." Not because of the reward. Layla was quiet for a moment, then nodded. He hugged her tightly. But as the two of them walked back inside, Carter couldn't stop the thought from gnawing at him. Had he just made the biggest mistake of his life? And somewhere high above Houston, Aurora Sterling wondered the very same thing. The flight back to the city was a blur of noise and vibration that Aurora hardly noticed. Beneath her, Houston stretched wide, but her mind was trapped on a quiet working-class street, echoing the most absurd conversation of her life. He had said no. No one had ever said no to Aurora Sterling. And more importantly, no one had ever turned down $2 million. Statistically impossible. Aurora had built her life on a single principle. Everyone and everything had a price, if you found the right number. But Carter Wynne had no number. He was an anomaly, infuriating, yet irresistibly intriguing. The helicopter landed on the roof of Sterling Logistics headquarters, the light jolt snapping her back to reality. Benji was waiting, holding the door. "They're in Warehouse 3, he reported, hurrying to match her stride. "Mr. Parrish has already started the introduction, trying to buy time." "Not buy time," Aurora corrected, her voice steel as they stepped into the private elevator. "Sweat bullets." The doors opened, leading into the cavernous warehouse. At the center, the Titan prototype stood under harsh industrial lights, surrounded by a group of clients and a tense Sterling team. Aurora recognized the lead client immediately. Garrick, a notorious negotiator, his face like a clenched fist, flanked by two analysts. Beside them, Damon Parrish wore a strained smile that relaxed visibly when Aurora appeared. "Aurora! Just in time," Damon said loudly, gesturing toward the machine. "We're ready for the final demonstration." Aurora didn't spare him a glance, her eyes fixed on Garrick. "Thank you for your patience, Mr. Garrick." "We made last-minute adjustments to ensure peak performance." Garrick's reply was heavy, measured. "I hope so, Ms. Sterling. My company doesn't invest in potential. We invest in results. Show me." The tension was taut as wire. 2 years of research, $100 million invested, all condensed into this moment. "Run the sequence, Damon." Damon tapped a command. A deadly silence fell. A bead of sweat traced his temple. Then a low hum swelled. Titan powered up. A container slid onto the conveyor, red lasers scanning. The main sorting arm, the critical weak point, swung down, gripped the container, and set it on the pallet with pinpoint accuracy. Once. Then again. And again. Perfect. A collective sigh of relief swept the room. Damon's smile suddenly seemed real. "As you can see," he said, regaining confidence, 100% efficiency. My team worked through the night." "What's that?" Garrick interrupted, stepping closer. His finger pointed to the main joint. Every gaze followed. A small piece of scrap metal, clamped tight with industrial wire. Crude, practical, but undeniably effective. The one part of the multi-million-dollar machine that wasn't polished like factory output. Damon didn't miss a beat. "Ah, good question," he said smoothly. "That's a proprietary reinforcement, an urgent innovation by my team to improve stability. Proof of our creative thinking." Aurora studied it. Simple. Elegant. Clearly not the work of engineers chained to code. A flash in her mind. Carter Wynn. Greasy hands bent over his daughter's bicycle chain. The man who turned down money because doing right was enough. An irregularity. And Aurora's instincts screamed. Damon was lying. "Benji," she ordered, "pull the security feed for this area. Grid 7, last 12 hours. Damon stiffened. "Aurora, that's unnecessary. Now, Benji." Benji fumbled with the tablet. Footage appeared on the big screen. Fast forward. Engineers arguing, leaving around 3 a.m. empty warehouse. Then a lone figure entered. Gray uniform, mop cart. Carter Wynn. On the screen, Carter paused before Titan. He didn't clean. He listened, laid a hand on the joint as if feeling its faulty rhythm. He glanced around, pulled a scrap piece from his cart, and a roll of wire. Calm, precise, he fashioned a brace, securing it with a clean interlocking knot. Checked it, nodded in quiet satisfaction, then walked on with his broom. The warehouse was silent. Only the smooth hum of the machine remained. Garrick turned from the screen to Damon, his face pale. Then to Aurora, his eyes glinting with newfound respect. "Ms. Sterling," he said slowly, a smile forming. "Seems your company has more talent than it shows. Let's talk numbers." Aurora said nothing, her gaze frozen on Damon. Cold enough to burn. She didn't need to shout. She only said, "Get out!" 2 words, light as air, detonated like gunfire. Damon flushed red. "Aurora, listen, it was pressure, Your team didn't do that." Aurora pointed at the screen, paused on Carter's image. "He did. The man you and your Ivy League engineers dismissed. The one you'd have let take the fall if Titan failed." Her voice was blades, every word cutting. "You didn't just lie to the clients. You lied to me." She turned away. Final. "Security will escort you out. Your access is revoked." Damon's mouth opened, but no words came. His career ended in silence. Aurora faced Garrick. Apologies for the internal drama, Mr. Garrick. Garrick chuckled, gravelly. Don't apologize. That was the most impressive part. Machines can be built anywhere. Integrity takes leadership. He extended a hand. We have a deal. Send the contract, and send my regards to Mr. Wynne. Aurora shook his hand, tasting victory, but feeling hollow. The contract secured, the traitor exposed. But the ghost from the fire now had a name, a face, and he loomed over her empire. Benji, she said, find Carter Wynne. I need to see him immediately. Benji frowned at the tablet. Problem. Saturday's his day off. He's not on site, of course. He'd be home, bending over an old bike, living a life where integrity wasn't a corporate slogan, but a way of being. The thought of descending on his street in a helicopter again felt absurd. He didn't need theatrics. This had to be different. Get me the keys to a sedan from the fleet, she said. Something plain. No logos. Benji's eyes widened. You're driving yourself. Aurora nodded, something unfamiliar creeping into her voice. It's time I found my own way. The park at the end of Carter's Street lay quiet, afternoon sunlight stretching long shadows across the grass. Layla pumped her legs hard on the swing, as if she might kick the sky. Carter sat on a wooden bench nearby, smiling as he watched her. The morning's events, the helicopter, the woman with the envelope full of money he had refused, now felt like a distant dream. Easy to believe it had never happened. Dad, Layla called, slowing the swing. Will the helicopter lady come back? I don't think so, sweetheart. She belongs to another world. You should visit her world, Layla said firmly. You could fix everything they have. He chuckled, but there was sadness in the sound. Once, he had brushed close to that world. Years ago, he'd won a scholarship to a technical school, his head buzzing with ideas. But then his father fell ill, and his mother couldn't manage alone. Carter left school to work, to support his family. By the time he might have returned, the chance was gone. Then came Jessica, his wife, Layla's mother. In the early years, love was enough to carry them through hardship. But as bills stacked higher, as his night shifts stretched endless, she wore down. I can't live like this anymore, Carter. Layla deserves better. That night was the last. By morning, Jessica was gone, with Marcus, a man in a River Oaks mansion who promised the life Carter never could. Since then, Carter's world had shrunk to just Layla. Everything he did, every sacrifice, revolved around the little girl who believed her dad could fix the whole world. Lost in thought, he didn't notice the sedan pulling quietly to the curb. Only when he saw a woman's silhouette approaching did he realize Aurora Sterling. No helicopter, no assistant. Just a simple dress, out of place, yet determined. Mr. Wynne, she said, her tone softer now, stripped of its icy edge. Carter rose. Miss Sterling. Layla hopped off the swing, running to stand behind his leg, peeking out curiously. Aurora knelt to meet Layla's eyes. Hello, Layla. Your father is an extraordinary man. Then she looked up at Carter. I came to apologize. He frowned. Apologize? You don't owe me anything. For never really seeing you, Aurora said, her voice uncharacteristically sincere. I only saw a janitor, a hero in a video, a puzzle I couldn't solve. But I never actually saw the man standing in front of me. She drew a breath and recounted everything from the warehouse, the demo, Damon's lie, the security footage. You didn't just save my life, Carter, she said, the first time she spoke his name. You saved my company, the most important thing I've ever built. And you did it with a piece of scrap and a roll of wire, while my $1 million team chased illusions. Carter was silent, at a loss for words. "This morning, I tried to give you a reward," Aurora continued. "I was wrong. You can't be reduced to a number, but I can give you something real." She paused, then spoke plainly. "I want you on my R&D team. Not as a janitor. As a real member." Carter's heart jolted. "R&D? I don't have a degree. I never finished college." "I have a dozen people with degrees," Aurora shot back, her passion reigniting. "They follow textbooks. I need someone who sees what they don't. I need someone who understands how machines truly work." She leaned toward him. "I need the man who fixed Titan." He shook his head, old shame rising. "I'm not qualified." "Yes, you are," Layla burst out, frustrated by his silence. She pulled a worn spiral notebook from her backpack and handed it to Aurora. "Look at this." Aurora opened it, puzzled at first. Then her eyes widened. Pages filled with intricate sketches, optimized bicycle gears, a self-watering plant pot made from recycled bottles, schematics for a small wind generator, handwritten notes, clear and meticulous, not a child's doodles, the work of a natural engineer. Aurora looked up, stunned, from Carter to Layla. "He has a whole box of these at home," Layla said proudly. "My dad's not just a janitor. He's an inventor." Aurora held the notebook like a treasure. The offer between them was no longer just a job. It was a question of who Carter really was. Will you choose to stand on the sidelines forever, or step through the door that has just opened before you? He stood frozen, caught between the blazing belief in his daughter's eyes and the staggering reality of Aurora holding his life's secret. The notebook carried years of stifled ideas, nights scribbled alone after back-breaking shifts. Now exposed to light, it felt like his very soul was being read aloud. I don't know what to say," he whispered at last. Aurora closed the notebook, returning it with reverence. Her gaze was calm but resolute. "You don't need to say anything. Your work already spoke for you." She straightened, concise. R&D Department, 45th floor. Monday, 9 a.m. My assistant will send the details. By the end of today, an advance will be in your account so you can prepare. Carter glanced at his calloused hands, his worn jeans. "Men like me. We don't work on the 45th floor, Ms. Sterling." Aurora gave a faint, genuine smile. "The first. Now you do. And call me Aurora." Driving back toward downtown, she felt a door inside her chest swing open. A feeling she hadn't known in 3 years. In the rearview mirror, Carter and Layla still stood in the afternoon sun, the notebook between them like a bridge to the future. For the first time since Elliot's death, Aurora Sterling wasn't merely existing. She was alive. Monday morning felt like a dream. Carter stood before the gleaming glass tower of Sterling Logistics, the building he had entered hundreds of times before through the service door in the back. Today, he walked through the front. A new shirt, stiff and unfamiliar. In his hand, a leather briefcase instead of a mop bucket. Each number lighting up on the elevator panel felt like another step into thinner air. The doors opened on the 45th floor. Before him spread a world of controlled chaos. Whiteboards dense with equations, 3D printers buzzing inside glass enclosures, clusters of young engineers with bright eyes huddled around laptops, speaking in a language of code and algorithms he barely understood. Carter felt like an imposter, a janitor in borrowed clothes. Some of the engineers looked up, their eyes flickering between curiosity and recognition. The man from the security footage. Before Carter could retreat, Aurora stepped out from a glass conference room. "Carter, welcome," she said warmly, but with her usual professionalism. She turned to the whole lab. "Everyone, attention! This is Carter Wynn, our new innovation specialist." A ripple of whispers swept the room. Innovation specialist? A vague title, but heavy with weight. Anyone who's worked on Titan knows. Our team suffers from a critical gap in hands-on perspective, Aurora continued, casting a pointed glance toward the Titan group. Carter sees the machine itself, not just the code behind it. I expect full cooperation and resource sharing. A clever framing. Not an outsider to be stared at, but an asset. She had just wrapped him in armor of legitimacy. She led him to a desk by a wide window overlooking the city. "This is yours. The formal offer letter's on the system. You can read it later. But first..." Together they walked to the center of the lab, where a small delivery drone sat open on a workbench. "Swiftwing," Aurora introduced. "Urban delivery drone. Fast, agile, but with a fatal flaw. After 20 minutes of flight, it overheats, thermal sensors scramble, navigation destabilizes. We've tried a dozen software patches, redesigned the ventilation twice. No luck." She handed him a tablet filled with thermal images and schematics. "The engineers suspect a processing bottleneck." "Take a look. What do you see?" Carter stared at the tablet, his heart sinking. Numbers and graphs spoke a foreign language. Around him, technical jargon flew: computational fluid dynamics, thermal efficiency. The old wave of insecurity surged. He was a fraud, a man who didn't belong here. He set the tablet down and bent over the drone itself. Circling the bench, his eyes traced the mechanical layout. His hands skimmed the carbon fiber shell. He peered into the tight bundle of wires. He ignored the data. He looked at the machine, and he saw it. A bundle of wires tied neatly with a zip tie right beside the main motor. By the manual, perfectly correct. But in his mind, he could see the heat radiating off the motor, trapped in the bundled wires, feeding straight into the thermal sensor less than a centimeter away. "The problem isn't the processor," he said softly, cutting through the debate. Every head turned toward him. "The heat isn't coming from the chip. It's from the motor. This wire bundle is acting like a heat channel, funneling it into the sensor. You're not measuring chip temperature. You're measuring engine temperature." He straightened. "Just reroute the wiring. Let it breathe. The problem disappears." Silence. The lead engineer stared at the drone, then at Carter, lips parted. So simple. They'd missed it while chasing a sophisticated software solution. The corner of Aurora's mouth curved into a slow, satisfied smile. That afternoon left Carter with a kind of exhaustion he hadn't felt in years. Not the ache of back-to-back shifts, but the good fatigue of a mind put to its true use. "How's your new office, Dad?" Layla asked, sitting on the living room floor with her homework. Carter thought of the tiny apartment around him, then the view from the 45th floor. "Good," he answered, and for the first time, the word felt true. Really good. Night fell. After Layla drifted to sleep, Carter sat at the kitchen table, pushing aside the pile of overdue bills, opening a brand-new notebook he'd bought on the way home. On the first blank page, under the steady hum of the old fridge, Carter Wynne, the inventor, began to draw. The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution. Swiftwing, once its wiring was rerouted as Carter suggested, flew steady. The overheating vanished. The stunned silence in the lab gave way to cautious respect. Then, genuine curiosity. They discovered Carter had even named the phenomenon he diagnosed thermal channeling, a term not found in textbooks, coined by him. Carter began attending project meetings, at first sitting quietly at the back. When debates about the automated elevator stalled between hydraulics and magnetic levitation, he quietly sketched in his notebook, slid it across. Have you considered counterweights using the building's own gravity? He didn't just solve problems, he reframed them. Dr. Sarah Chen, a senior engineer once skeptical, gradually became an ally. Marcus Thompson, the brash young hotshot, learned to respect him. Aurora watched from afar. Each time a design was finalized, the engineers paused a beat, glancing toward Carter's desk, waiting for his nod or the faint crease of his brow. He never boasted, never said, "I told you so." He simply shared his findings with a quiet humility more persuasive than any show of ego. Between Carter and Aurora, the way they addressed each other shifted too. No longer CEO and janitor, no longer benefactor and project. They were colleagues. Carter brought his notebook into Aurora's office. The two could sit for hours, not as boss and employee, but as fellow inventors. She spoke of market expansion and patent law. He spoke of gear ratios and stress tolerances. She taught him the language of her world. He reminded her that bolts and pins held the whole thing together. For the first time in 3 years, Aurora Sterling felt she wasn't just building a company. She was building something that looked a little like a family. 6 weeks had passed since Carter's first day at Sterling Logistics, and a new rhythm had formed. On Friday nights, either Aurora stopped by the small Montrose apartment, or Carter and Layla went up to her penthouse. Those dinners had become the anchor of their weeks. Tonight was at Aurora's penthouse. The vast apartment, once cold and sterile, now felt warmer. Layla's crayon drawings taped across the stainless steel fridge, toys scattered across the marble coffee table, children's laughter filling the empty spaces. "How's the ORBIT nav system coming along?" Aurora asked, handing Carter a slice of pizza. She'd grown used to calling Joey's Pizza instead of her private chef. "Better than I dared hope," Carter replied, his eyes lighting up as he spoke about the project. "The gyroscope cluster in the lab is running perfectly. We could be field testing next month." Layla looked up from her math homework. "Dad's making GPS without satellites." "A simplified version, yes," Carter laughed. "But basically right." Aurora watched them, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. Only now did she realize. This was what family felt like. "Aurora," Layla called her by name now, no longer Miss Sterling. "Next week, can I come see the lab?" "Of course, kiddo." Next week, Carter glanced at Aurora. Something unspoken passed between them. The boundary between the 45th floor and the Montrose stoop was gone. In their private work sessions, something shifted. Subtle, but profound. Aurora found herself looking forward to meetings with Carter in a way she had never anticipated any meeting. In her office, they spread blueprints across the glass table. She spoke of market strategy and patent potential. He pointed out why one configuration wouldn't survive in the real world, then sketched an alternative with a confident, precise stroke of his pencil. "Jessica once told me I lived in the clouds," he said one afternoon, gesturing to a complex drone assembly. It was the first time he'd mentioned his ex-wife. A faint pang hit Aurora's chest. Not jealousy, but a curious instinct to protect. "She was wrong," Aurora replied simply. "You live in the real world. The rest of us are just trying to catch up." Carter looked at her, something fragile glimmering in his eyes. "Do you ever feel stuck between two worlds? Like you don't really belong in either?" Aurora thought of Elliot, of building Sterling Logistics from grief and sheer will, of the Ice Queen mask she'd worn to survive. "Every day," she whispered. "Until recently." Sunlight poured gold over the arboretum. At first, Carter had hesitated. Events like these were for polished executives with picture-perfect families, children in matching outfits. But Aurora had insisted, and now he understood. She wanted the world to see them as a team. Layla darted from booth to booth, wide-eyed with delight at pony rides and face painting. Carter felt out of place in his polo and jeans among the crowd's casual luxury. "Carter!" Dr. Sarah Chen came over with her husband and young daughter. "I want you to meet my family." "He's an architect. I've been telling him all about the genius here." The conversation flowed easily. Carter felt at ease, talking technical details with Sarah's husband, joking with the kids. But not everyone was friendly. "Carter, Wynn," a voice drawled with faint contempt. Richard Blackwood from marketing appeared with his wife, both dressed as though for a country club gala. "Cynthia, remember? This is the janitor from the video. My husband's told me all about his meteoric rise." Carter's face burned. The familiar shame, judged by his past, clenched his chest. Cynthia's eyes skimmed him up and down, her thin smile sharp. "Amazing what the press can do for someone's career, isn't it?" Before Carter could answer, Aurora stepped forward, her graceful composure replaced by icy authority. "You're mistaken, Cynthia," Aurora said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "The press didn't give Carter his job. His talent did. The Swiftwing, your husband's department, is about to spend millions marketing. It flies because of Carter. His results are the reason your husband gets a bonus this quarter." She smiled, the same razor-thin smile Cynthia had just given Carter. "Amazing what real ability can do for a company, isn't it?" Cynthia's face went pale, then flushed crimson. She stammered an apology before dragging Richard away. Carter looked at Aurora, his throat tight. She had defended him, not as a boss shields an employee, but as something more. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. "Yes," Aurora met his eyes. "I did." As the sun set, painting the rose garden gold, they found Layla on a bench, sketching. "What are you drawing?" Aurora asked softly, sitting beside her. Layla held up the page, the garden, and in the center 2 figures standing together, talking, her dad and Aurora. "Dad says some things have to break before they can be fixed," Layla said without looking up. "I think you used to be broken." Aurora froze. "Really?" Layla looked up, gaze steady, startlingly serious. "You were lonely. Are you better now?" Aurora looked at the girl, then at Carter, watching with a gentle smile. Something unlocked in her chest. "I'm getting better," she whispered. "I think so." That night, after Carter and Layla had gone, Aurora stood at her penthouse window, gazing at the city lights. For the first time since Elliot's death, she didn't feel drowned in grief. She picked up the photo of Elliot on the side table. The man with gentle eyes and a radiant smile, always smudged with grease from whatever he was building. "You'd like him," she said softly to the picture. "He sees the world like you did, making things work with his hands and his heart." She paused, realizing what she had just admitted to herself. "And I think I'm falling in love with him." For the first time, saying it didn't feel like betraying Elliot's memory. It felt like healing. Outside, Houston stretched wide, the city of second chances and new beginnings. Somewhere, perhaps, Carter sat at his kitchen table, pencil moving across his notebook. And for the first time in 3 years, Aurora Sterling felt the future was within reach. 3 months after Family Day, life had settled into a steady rhythm. Carter's confidence at Sterling Logistics had grown. The team respected him. And Aurora was more than just a boss. They hadn't crossed any obvious line, but the taut thread between them grew more visible every day. That peace was real, hard-earned, which was why no one noticed the storm gathering on the horizon. It began with an anonymous email landing in Aurora's private inbox on Monday morning. The subject line carried a single word: ether. Aurora froze, coffee cup halfway to her lips. Only one man alive knew that name. The code name for Elliot's final project, the design stolen to build Ashford Dynamics. The body of the email contained only a link to an article praising Sterling Logistics' recent successes, spotlighting rising star innovator Carter Wynn. A chill ran down her spine. Aurora deleted the email instantly, her hand trembling slightly. She told herself it was coincidence, just a ghost from the past. But Victor Ashford didn't believe in coincidence. A week later, the R&D servers were breached. Nothing stolen, no data copied. But the system logs showed someone had opened the core files of the ORBIT nav system, the project Carter had developed from a sketch in his notebook, a technology that could make every satellite-dependent navigation system obsolete. Hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. Aurora's armor began to reform. Her laughter grew rarer, her shoulders carrying the old tension again. Carter noticed immediately. The natural ease in their meetings gave way to stiff formality. Aurora looked at him with a worry he didn't yet understand. "What's wrong?" he asked one afternoon, after she abruptly dismissed one of his proposals. "Everything's fine," she said curtly. "Just market pressure." "Don't worry about it." He knew she was lying. Days later, the threat revealed itself. Carter came home to find his apartment door ajar. His heart leapt to his throat. He burst inside, calling Layla's name. Layla was safe, still at after-school care. Carter swept through each room, the TV still there, the laptop untouched, even the coffee tin full of spare change unmoved. He was about to call the police when he saw it. The notebook he used for Sterling projects was gone from the kitchen table. In its place lay a single, perfect black raven feather. Victor Ashford's mark, the emblem he'd branded his company with. A message. Carter stared at it, his mind spinning. The man knew his work, knew where he lived, had entered his home when his daughter could easily have been there. A cold, sharp fear. But beneath it, something else. The fire Aurora had lit in him on that highway months ago. "Your story isn't over." That night, Carter drove to Aurora's penthouse. He bypassed the receptionist, strode straight into the private elevator. When the doors opened, Aurora saw his face, and the black feather in his hand. The walls she'd held for years crumbled. "He knows," Carter said, voice low and taut. "Who is he, Aurora? And what does he want with me?" She let him in, her face pale. At last, she told him everything. About Elliot, the gentle husband, brilliant like Carter. About Victor Ashford, the ruthless partner with no conscience. How he sabotaged the prototype to steal the ether drive patent. The plane crash, the official report calling it mechanical failure. But Aurora knew the truth. 6 months later, Victor's company, built on stolen innovation, became a global empire. "I've been fighting him for years," Aurora said, her voice ragged with pain and fury. "In court, in the press, he's always one step ahead. No one can touch him." She looked at the feather in Carter's hand. "Now he's noticed you. He sees your talent as a threat to the lie he built his empire on. He thinks you're another Elliot Carter reeled." The pieces clicked into place. Aurora's guardedness, the break-in, the missing notebook. This wasn't about work anymore. He and Layla were caught in a war they hadn't known existed. "He's not just after your ideas, Carter," Aurora whispered, tears streaking down her face. "He wants to erase you, to get to me." Carter looked from her tear-stained face to the feather in his hand. He thought of Layla, asleep in her little room, unaware a predator circled their lives. The fear was real, sharp, but beneath it grew something else. What Aurora had taught him. All his life he'd been dismissed, overlooked, labeled, janitor, dropout, nobody. Aurora had shown him who he was, an innovator, a problem solver, a man who could fix the machine. Victor had made a mistake. He'd threatened the wrong man's family. Carter crushed the feather in his fist. "No," he said, steady and fierce. "He won't touch you." "Or me." Aurora looked at him through her tears and saw something she'd never seen before. Not just the quiet craftsman, not just the man who did the right thing, but a man ready to fight for what he loved. "What do we do now?" she asked. Carter's mind worked the way it did before a broken machine. "We do what I do best. Find his weakness and fix him. For good." "First step," Carter said, his voice turning tactical. "Layla goes to Austin to stay with her cousin Maria." Tonight, Aurora nodded. "I'll send a car. Security?" "No," Carter cut her off, firm. "No company cars, nothing tied to Sterling Logistics. I'll drive her myself tonight. If Victor's watching, he'll expect a corporate response. He won't expect a father making an unplanned family visit." He paused, gazing out at Houston's horizon. "Besides, I need him to think he's winning. That he's scaring us." "You're planning something," Aurora pressed. "I'm thinking about the Orbit Nav demonstration next month. The big event. The whole industry invited." Aurora's eyes widened. "You want to turn it into a trap." "Victor won't resist humiliating an enemy in public. He'll want to sabotage the demo, make us fall on our faces in front of everyone who matters." Carter gave a thin smile. For the first time, Aurora saw the ruthless edge beneath his calm. "And when he strikes, we'll be waiting." 2 hours later, Carter carried a drowsy Layla to the car. She didn't understand why they were leaving so late, why her father looked so tense, but she trusted him completely. "Where are we going, Dad?" she mumbled, clutching her unicorn backpack. "To Austin, sweetheart. Visiting Cousin Maria for a few days," Carter smiled, hiding his fear. "A little vacation. What about Aurora? Isn't she coming?" Carter's throat tightened. "No, honey. Aurora has work, but we'll see her soon." The car slipped quietly out of Houston onto I-35. In the rearview mirror, Carter caught a glimpse of a black sedan following at a careful distance. Victor's men. Watching. Good. Let them see him taking his daughter to safety. Let them believe he was running. They had no idea he was preparing for a fight. At her penthouse, Aurora stood at the window, staring down at the ocean of city lights. For months, she'd felt she was building something beautiful. A thriving company. Carter finding his place. Layla bringing joy she hadn't felt since Elliot died. Now, all of it was under threat from a ghost of the past. She lifted the phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in 2 years. "Jenkins Security. This is Aurora Sterling. I need to discuss a full protection package. It's urgent." As she spoke through the details, she felt the old ice settle back over her shoulders. The Ice Queen returned, but this time she wasn't protecting only herself. She was protecting the family she had just found. And Victor Ashford had no idea what kind of enemy he had just provoked. 3 weeks had passed since Layla was taken to Austin. 3 weeks of meticulous preparation, calculated misdirection, and a tightening wire of tension. Carter and Aurora worked without rest, finishing the real Orbit Nav system while building a trap for Victor Ashford. "Are you sure?" Aurora asked softly in the R&D room at midnight. All week they had only met at this hour, to avoid curious eyes and any chance of surveillance. Carter looked up from the bench, where he was tuning a mesh of microsecurity drones. I'm sure of one thing. He won't stop until one of us goes down. Layla won't be safe until he's stopped. Aurora's PR team had launched a full-court campaign for the Orbit Nav debut. They booked the main hall at the George R. Brown Convention Center, sent invitations to every major name in the industry, and hand-delivered one to Victor Ashford. The media buzzed, "Sterling Logistics promises a navigation revolution." The post-GPS era? From janitor to genius, will Carter Wynn change the game? The headlines made Carter uncomfortable, but he understood. Victor's ego wouldn't resist a target that public. At Ashford Dynamics' Dallas office, Victor opened the invitation. A tall man, silver hair, expensive suit. A kingdom built on lies and stolen invention. Seeing the name Carter Wynn, the corner of his mouth ticked up. So Aurora Sterling thinks she's landed another prodigy, he muttered, glancing at his aide. Another Elliot. The name Elliot Sterling made Victor's jaw twitch. The brilliant young engineer who had threatened to expose his patent theft. The accident had been necessary, but for 3 years it still haunted him. Now Aurora had a replacement, someone who could render Victor's drone fleet obsolete. Someone who had to be eliminated before it was too late. "Book me a ticket to Houston," Victor ordered. "I won't miss this." The night before the showcase, Carter stood in the empty Grand Hall, running a final check on the defense grid. 12 upgraded Swift Wings hung silently from the rafters, nearly invisible in the dark, each fitted with a high-resolution camera and an encrypted link to the backstage control station. Aurora entered with a tablet showing the floor plan and security routes. "Jenkins Security has the perimeter sealed," she said. Plainclothes staff across the audience. "But if Victor is as clever as we think, he'll slip past standard security." "That's why we have these." Carter nodded toward the hidden drones. "He'll be counting on magnetometers, guards, standard protocols. He won't expect a technical answer." They worked in a companionable quiet, rehearsing contingencies and backups. The wire between them had changed color over the past weeks. No longer just teammates, but two people who had found each other in the chaos, preparing to protect what they'd built. "Carter," Aurora said softly, eyes still on the screen. "If anything goes wrong tomorrow—" "It won't," he cut in. "If it does," she looked up, meeting his gaze. "I want you to know, these past months, working with you, hearing Layla fill my home with laughter, it's the first time since Elliot that I've felt truly alive." Carter stepped closer, close enough to see the tiny flecks of gold in her ice-blue eyes. "Aurora, I know work is a mess, and everything that's happening—" He set a gentle hand to her cheek. "After tomorrow, when it's done and Layla's safe, we'll figure it out." They stood in the dim hall, the future balanced on a blade's edge, borrowing one another's steadiness. Morning came gray, the sky matching the mood of the convention center. By 10 a.m., the hall was packed with industry leaders, reporters, rivals. Carter spotted Victor at once, the distinguished man in the front row, wearing his confidence like a mask. Aurora took the stage, calm to the point of cold. Carter lingered backstage, heart hammering. Everything they'd done funneled into the next hour. For decades, Aurora's voice carried evenly. Navigation technology has depended on external signals, satellites, beacons, wireless networks, all of them susceptible to interference. Today, that dependence ends. Carter keyed the final arm of the defense grid. On his monitor, 12 camera feeds stabilized, each covering a different sector of the hall. "We are proud to introduce the future of autonomous navigation, a system that looks inward instead of relying outward, the ORBIT Nav system." Right on cue, The demo dais rose from center stage. Instead of a single large drone, a cluster of small ones shot up in perfect formation, and the lights went out. The hall plunged into absolute darkness. Gasps flared, followed by a low ripple of unease. In the dark, Victor smiled and motioned to his plant on the rigging to cut the main feed. The darkness lasted only seconds. 12 red points slashed across the air above. Carter's hidden drone net spun up silently, night vision cameras streaming live to the massive screen behind the stage. The screen lit, not with a keynote slide, but a razor-sharp image. A man suspended on the catwalk, bolt cutters in hand, caught mid-bite on the power line. He froze in the crosshairs of a dozen laser dots. The room held its breath. Security swarmed and took him down. "Seems we've had a minor technical hiccup," Aurora said smoothly into the mic, her eyes, glacial and locked, boring into Victor. But Orbit Nav isn't tonight's main story. Behind her appeared a photo. Elliot Sterling, gentle-eyed, warm-smiled. "This is my husband, Elliot Sterling," Aurora said, her voice thick with feeling. "The true architect of modern drone engineering." She flashed the original Ether Drive schematics, time-stamped, then flipped to the internal layout of Victor's best-selling engine. A perfect match, down to the smallest detail. "Mr. Ashford built an empire on a lie," Aurora declared, her words ringing like a hammer. "But every lie is a machine with a fatal flaw. And my team is very good at finding flaws." She drew a breath. When Mr. Ashford's men stole Carter's notebook a few weeks ago, they thought they were stealing his ideas. In reality, they brought home a Trojan horse. The notebook contained decoy designs seeded with a diagnostic virus. We knew Ashford's team would try to breach our server to verify what they'd stolen. When they did, our virus activated. It didn't steal their data. It searched for a ghost. On the screen, an encrypted file surfaced from deep within Ashford Dynamics' private server. The file name? Ether, created 4 years ago, months before Victor claimed to have invented it. Everything ended there. The evidence was plain, irrefutable, broadcast live to the entire industry. Victor sat stone still, his mask shattering as federal agents began moving toward his row. The ghost he buried had returned, to bury him. 6 months later, Sterling Logistics' R&D floor was calm. Sunset painted the sky in orange and violet. Aurora, Carter, and Layla, back safe in Houston, stood by the glass, looking out over the city. Peace was no longer a temporary ceasefire. It was the new state of things. Victor Ashford faced a raft of charges: corporate espionage, patent theft, conspiracy. His company buckled under the scandal's weight. At last, Aurora had won justice for Elliot. She renamed the R&D division. A new silver plaque on the door read, "Sterling Wynn Innovation Center." "Has a nice ring to it," Carter said, sipping coffee, smiling. Aurora smiled back, warmth reaching her eyes. "It does. Elliot would have liked you." Layla sat on the floor and held up her sketchbook. She'd drawn the 3 of them, not stick figures, but fairly detailed, standing together before the window. Underneath, she'd written, "The Fixers." Carter knelt to hug her, then looked over her shoulder at Aurora, his heart full. He had missed a job interview and found an entire life. He had faced down a monster and found his own strength. "What are you thinking?" Aurora asked softly. Carter pulled out his notebook, now filled with designs for their shared future. He sketched a few quick lines: a house with a small yard, a workshop out back, a swing. "I'm thinking about what comes next," he said, meeting her eyes, no longer afraid to imagine the future. And they stood there together, watching Houston's lights flick on one by one like a newborn galaxy coming to life. And that is the journey from an unknown janitor to the man who changed an empire. Carter Wynn proved that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't money or title, but resolve, honesty, and the love you carry for the people who matter most. What do you think? If it were you, would you have the courage to turn down millions to hold on to your values? Tell us in the comments. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe to True Tale Time, and ring the bell, because many more stories of grit and faith are waiting ahead. See you in the next video.